Hello, my name is Margaret Adele, and welcome to another indie book review. This is one in which I wildly misinterpreted what my reading mood was, because I would have sworn to you just 5 days ago that I was really just in the mood for some light-hearted romance. I just needed to keep things light. But I had this one review book that had been on my list for forever, and you know what? Let's focus on the bigger books for April. I'll just pick this up and see. And oh my word, I was like, yes! Big space battles against space terrorists. Let's go! So today I am reviewing Ronan by EJ Fisch. This book is the third in the Ziva Payvan series, and I believe it was originally meant to be a trilogy, hence why this book feels like it is a very big culmination of things. Now, obviously, I am going to be discussing the things that happened in the first two books, so the review for them will be down in the description below. Now, this one, it's big. The concept of it is rather large, whereas the first two was already dealing with some space terrorists. This one has an even bigger antagonist, and you don't actually know who or what the antagonist is. At the end of book two, Ziva had made a friend in the woman Kat, who had been researching all of these different data points for this entity known as Ronan, who had been infecting people with something, or they had a serum and it was killing people, and she was trying to get all the information before she herself died from it. And her dying wish was for Ziva to then take the information and continue on with it. Well, other things happen over the course of that story, and Ziva gets horrifically injured and ends up in a rehabilitation center for all of her injuries. And in that time, Aroska finds the information that Kat had on Ronan and basically takes the team out into the field to find them, and in the meantime gets one of them captured. Zinni is captured for, I don't even know how much of the book. So the big thing for Ziva, upon coming out of rehab and a mini trial, she's always on trial, she discovers that a member of her team, one of the only friends she has in the world, is captured by an evil entity 4 weeks prior, and they still aren't exactly sure what Ronan even is. So she's pissed, but she's back in the field and on a mission, and it's great. It's so good. I was unprepared for how much the high stakes, fast paced narrative was gonna hit the spot for me. I forget that I do genuinely adore military sci-fi, and why don't I read it more? But the world building in this one was still a lot to take in for me, like it had been in the previous books. This, I will give it credit, this is one of those series that it just drops you in. It doesn't give out paragraphs of exposition, but because it had been so long since I'd read the first two, there was a lot that I'd forgotten, but some of it was actually kind of funny, like how the main race of this book, Haphesians, they have two stomachs, so they will in effect, eat larger amounts, but like with days in between their meals. They essentially have like a backup stomach. And I don't know why that always gets me. I'm pretty sure, I'm not gonna lie, I think that's just the author's way of not having to have her characters eat a lot. I think she's like, I hate eating scenes. I just want to do pew-pew battles in space. They just don't eat a lot. And it works because I think once you actually sit down and think of the timeline that this book happens over, I think it's a ton of stuff, but like only in like a week or two if you discount travel time. Like the actual plot from beat to beat happens like one right after the other in the course of days. It's so much, and it is gigantic, and it is great. The action scenes are fun and easy to understand. The big bad secret people of the entire series are the Nosti sci-fi words that have like magical telepathy powers, but also they specifically use this blade, and I'm gonna forget how to pronounce the word because again, sci-fi word, but even though it was very much like sci-fi magic stuff, it still made sense to me. It still worked. The big threat of this formula of the serum that was being used against people still made sense. And it was just a case of I would get confused to remember, okay, what's these people whole deal, this race, what's their deal in this race? And like I could kind of forget which the separate races, so eventually I kind of had to be like, these people are the cyborgs that do not like the protagonist people, and the protagonist people always look like MySpace kids trying way too hard to be cool. Like, don't get me wrong, Ziva's a badass, but the whole thing with the Hephaesians is that they're kind of like color coded. You know, they have their eyes are usually non-human colored eyes, so it's like bright gold, bright orange, whatever, and they have like a streak in their hair to match. Like, they're aesthetically color coded as a species, and it doesn't really add much to the story other than it is very, very easy for Ziva or really any of the characters to know who they're looking at a distance, because it'll be a specific color and they can be like, oh, that's obviously Skeet. No one else is that kind of neon orange. And I love that idea that that it's the most random aesthetic point to all of this. And it is such a I'm having this in the book because I want it mood, but that's kind of awesome. And in general, I don't have a lot bad to say about this book. I don't have a lot of negative criticism. The only one I could really think of is the information and the way it is brought out. So obviously the big part of this book is figuring out who or what is Ronan, how do you stop it or them, and what's this serum that they are putting out and infecting people with. And there was a lot of really cool reveals. I especially loved what the reveal of the serum was. Admittedly, the reveal of who Ronan wasn't quite as much of a surprise to me, but I loved in general, the antagonist's plan in this. It didn't necessarily feel entirely foolproof. There were a couple moments where I was like, okay, yeah, but what about X, Y, and Z? Didn't that throw a wrench in your plans? But for the most part, the general gist, I believed that was a plan an antagonist would come up with. The thing is that there's so many reveals, but the information is kind of given like over and over and over again because there are so many working parts. So you have the Hephaesians and several of them on the protagonist side, and then you have these allies they have in I think they're called Zerusians, and then you have points of view from the antagonists. And the book will reveal one point of note, one reveal, and then we'll reveal it again and again. Like, you'll view multiple characters, either multiple of the protagonists or the antagonists or these side characters, all learning the same info repeatedly. And in some cases, it can reveal like a little bit about their characters. But for the most part, I was like, I don't necessarily know that we needed to see that scene of that character realizing that when the reader already knew it from the last 2 times someone had found out about it. But beyond that, it was great. And maybe in a different book, I might have taken off a star for that. But the reason I did not hear, the reason it is 5-star is purely the ending. I am a stickler for endings. And if you've watched enough of my Shammy Stovall reviews, you will know I like gigantic endings. I like explosions and space battles and giant dramatic reveals and big character ports and like tearful goodbyes. Like, I love all of that. And this ending, it was so good. It was awesome with all the reveals out of the way, and we went to the big space battle, and you had the slow burn romance, and it was the slowest of burns finally coming to a head. Like, Araska and Ziva have the weirdest dynamic, and I love it. And by the end of the book, they were like sarcastically quoting each other from things they had said earlier, and it was brilliant. And then that very, 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 very ending thing, which I kind of hate the author for. Why would you do that to me? I did nothing to deserve that. And then the other thing with the whole, what's the time? Check the time. It was so good. It was so fast-paced and big. And to be honest, like, the actual big climactic battle, again, the actual, like, actual climactic fight against the big antagonist was only a small piece of a bigger thing. Like, oddly enough, the full antagonist, once you came down to it, was kind of not even the biggest point of the story, because the biggest point of the story was Ziva, who had been holding the secret that she was also not necessarily a Nosti, but had Nostian powers that were illegal, like highly illegal. Basically, she had to deal with the fact that to help put down the antagonist, to help save people, she would basically have to reveal her secret. And it was that whole moral quandary of, does she do it? Is she selfless enough for it? And that was like the biggest part of all of this. And then the ending. The freaking ending. To be honest, it actually ends with another reveal, like in like data logs, like the sparsely written out data logs, and I could barely understand what it was telling me, but like I got the general gist of what it was revealing. But it was so good. Like this, I can't explain to you how much I was like, I have not gotten this into a book in so long. And that sounds bad when I've just finished other review books that I liked, but there was just something about this world that I was like literally saying things out loud as I read. And I think part of the problem is that I was forcing myself to be like, well, clearly I want fluffy romances right now, when my brain was screaming, we want space battles. So just so we're clear, yes, I have switched it moving forward. The next book I picked up after this was a hard-hitting stop the serial killer urban fantasy. I have learned my lesson. I'm going to give my brain what it wants right now. But it was so good. I love this one so much. And yes, the second two books in the series will be coming. I've already talked to the author. Now, obviously, I gave this book 5 stars. Like I said, if the ending had been anything less than the absolute masterpiece it was, it might have been a 4-star. But gosh darn it, those last few twists and turns just got me. And if you are an indie author and would like a review like this one, or something like it, you can send me a review request. All of that information will be down in the description below. I'm also hopefully going to send out more information about how to get review requests, because I've gotten some mentions from authors that are like, I don't really know how to do this. So we'll talk about that more in another video later. But regardless, with nothing else to say, I hope you have a wonderful day and a marvelous tomorrow.